Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. It's me, Jake, again, your friendly nurse educator here in the UK. For today's video, we will be talking about sickness absence in the NHS. If you are just about to be deployed to work in one of the NHS trusts across the UK, then this is the perfect time for you to know what are your rights with regards to this topic. Even if you are already in the NHS, I'm sure you still don't know half of the things that I am going to talk about. This is going to be a slightly lengthier video, but I assure you that this is going to be everything that you need in order to fully understand your rights with regards to sickness in the NHS, but also your responsibilities so that you don't make any mistakes that could affect your current and even your future career. So grab your tea, your coffee, and your biscuit and take time to watch this video in full in order to protect your current employment as well as your future career. So I joined the NHS back in 2015 and I certainly do not remember having the full explanation of the sickness policy. So coming from a different country, it is a totally different set of policies that I needed to know. But if you are already working in the NHS, you know the reality that you barely even have time to have a pee break on your shift, let alone have a time set in your work hours in order to read this policy. So today I'm going to explain to you the essential points of your rights and responsibilities with regards to sickness absence. So just an overview, these are the topics that we will be covering. So first topic is, how do you call off sick from work? Next, your sickness certification requirements. Third, how much sick pay will you receive? Fourth is returning to work. And fifth, we will be talking about the absence triggers or your absence markers. All informative content in this video is based on publicly accessible sickness policy of different NHS trusts across the UK. And I will be sharing my own personal experience and some tips in all of those different topics. Alright, so let's begin. So the first question is, how do you call off sick? Or what is your process of absence reporting? Unlike in the Philippines, where I was previously working in, where you really had to go to the doctor on your first day and have your certificate, sent to your supervisor or emailed to your nursing supervisor, and only then can you actually take a paid sick leave. In some cases, you might be allowed to be off sick, but you won't even get paid. So in the UK, it's quite different. It's very simple actually. So all you need to do first thing is to call your manager. If for some reason your direct manager is not available or she's on leave, then you'd have to call the ward and speak to whoever is the band 6 or the nurse in charge, deputizing her role or acting as a manager for that day. How about if the nurse in charge is also not available at the time that you called and your manager is not there as well? Can you speak to any of the nurses? So obviously if you are sick, you wouldn't be calling every 5-10 minutes waiting for the nurse in charge to be available. And you know how busy the shift is. So yes, you can speak to any nurse. Make sure you tell them that you are sick for whatever shift is next, and then get their name so that you have a proof that you did call and who you spoke to. Now, once you've handed that information to them, it is then their responsibility to tell the nurse in charge when they come back from break. If this is the case, then you just don't stop at that. You also need to email or leave a voicemail to your manager or that nurse in charge detailing the reason of your sickness, and if it's preempted that you will be sick for a few days because it's a certain condition, let's say like COVID, then you can also leave that information. If you speak to someone who is not the nurse in charge and not your manager, do they have the right to know your reason for your illness or your sickness? So the answer is no. You have the right to confidentiality as to what the reason of your sickness is. The only person that you really need to tell the reason for sickness is your manager. If she's on leave, then the deputy nurse manager or your charge nurse, because they will be the one who will be putting this on record on your health roster, canceling your shift, and putting the reason, the category as to what illness you have before they can put the shift out. If you fell ill after office hours and your manager is no longer working, then you will need to call the hospital nursing site manager. And the reason for this is that she is the one with the access and the power to actually release your shift for it to be filled by another nurse from bank or from agency. Next question. When should you call? Now, the answer to this may vary among trusts, but the general rule of thumb is call as soon as you feel sick. Obviously, you will not know when you feel sick, when you start to vomit, when you get fever, or when you get COVID, or when you test positive for COVID. But obviously, the important thing is to let them know as soon as possible so that they can release your shift and have it filled by a different nurse, or if necessary, they can move some other nurse from other wards with sufficient numbers so as not to leave your ward unsafe with regards to staffing numbers. Most managers really prefer that you call early so that they have enough time to make some calls, to possibly call someone to cover the shift without going through agency or bank staff, rather than you riding it out and thinking, oh, you know what, I'm just gonna have a few hours of sleep and see if I feel better. And then at the last minute, about 1 or 2 hours before the shift, you still don't feel well, and then you call your manager, then that's gonna be a headache, because 1 or 2 hours is not enough to cover a shift. I've been there, done that. It's very hard to get someone to cover the shift within those few hours. You need at least a minimum of 4 hours in order to have enough time to complete that task. Last question with this topic, when should you call again? So without reading the policy before, I have been told that I need to call every single day whilst I am sick in order to say that I am still sick. But to me, it didn't really make sense, because if you're sick, you just want to, rest, recover, recuperate. And then you have to have that task of calling every single day to tell them that you are still sick. If you have a sickness absence that has a specified number of days, say for example COVID, which is 5 days at the moment, then you don't really need to call every single day, because it's a covered period. There's an isolation period that's strictly imposed. Okay, so you will need to call on day 5 if you're feeling better, in order to say that you have your first negative COVID result, and then you can check on the morning of your day 6, and if it's still negative and you're working a day shift, then you will need to work on that day. But the actual policy, in all the policies I've read, what it says is keep your manager informed of the progress. It doesn't specifically say call every day, but if there's any significant change or progress within your condition, then you need to tell your manager, whether it's positive that you're getting better a lot sooner and you can come back to work sooner, or if something has complicated and you need few more days, then you need to make sure that your manager is aware so that they can extend your number of sickness days and find more nurses to cover those shifts as well. So the very last call you make before you actually go back to work will be the day before you go back to work, in order to say that you are feeling so much better now, you're all recovered, and you are ready to go back to work the following day. So what documentations do you need to provide in order for your sickness absence to be valid? So the first 7 days of your sickness, that is your period of self-certification. That means you don't need any doctor giving you any medical certificate or sickness note to prove your condition. But this 7-day period is further divided. So for the first 3 days of illness, you don't need to provide anything. It is enough for you to have that conversation with your manager that you are sick and what's the reason for it. So for the first 3 days, you don't need to provide anything. From day 4 to day 7, however, you will need to fill in and send a sickness self-certification form, which is easily available in the UK government website and even in the Citizens Advice website. So I'm going to put the link down below in the description and as well as in the comments. So this form must be filled up by yourself and sent to your manager and must be received by the manager by day 7 or on your return, whichever is sooner. So for example, you are writing this form on day 4 and you return on day 6. You must bring it on day 6 rather than day 7. If your sickness lasts 8 days or more, this is the time that you will then be required to give a sickness note, also known as fitness to work form, or your doctor's certificate. Now, how can you get this one? So this one you can get by having a GP appointment. Now, we all know how long the GP queue can be. So I had my own experience where actually I already had that sickness for 2 weeks, but then my appointment for the GP was 4 weeks later. And if that is the case, your manager is aware of the whole GPQ system, then it is actually okay to have that appointment much later, and then the GP will backtrack the dates of your certificate to your actual sickness dates. So in the policy, it says that the sickness note or the doctor certificate should be received by the manager by day 12 of your sickness. But as I have said, with the GP queue being quite long, there will be exemptions to this. So you may be able to send your sick note much later than your actual sickness date. And just to point it out with regards to counting the number of sickness days, even if you only work Monday to Friday, Saturday and Sunday is also counted whilst you are sick. So how much sick pay will you get? Under UK laws, there is what we call statutory sick pay. Regardless of what kind of institution you are working in, whether it's NHS, whether it's another public entity or a private entity, you are entitled to a minimum amount of £99 and 35 pence per week of your illness, up to a maximum of 28 weeks. Okay? So let me say that again. £99 and 35 cents for a maximum of 28 weeks. That is your minimum sick pay that you can expect to receive. In the NHS, it is so much better because the amount you get is not this 99.35 per week, but it is actually dependent on your length of service, but most of the time it's full pay, and after a certain time it becomes half pay. So let me tell you the specific details. By reading several sickness policies, I was able to see that there is actually a uniform pay scale in terms of sickness absence in the NHS. So let me show you the table. So if you look at this table, it will tell you that if you are within your first 12 months of being an NHS employee, you can get a maximum of full pay, that is your normal standard monthly rate, whatever role you are in, for 1 month. Then if you are still sick after that 1 month, you can get half pay for a maximum of 2 months after that. So if you are over 1 year up to 2 years, your sickness pay, where you will get full pay, is 2 months, and after that you get additional 2 months of half pay. And if you go to the very end, if you have served the NHS over 6 years, then you get 6 months actual full pay, even if you're sick, and another 6 months of half pay. So you can see just how amazing the sickness benefit is in the NHS. If you were in a private company and say you got sick, you'd only be getting 99.35 per week as a minimum. So if you multiply that by 4, you get £400 for the month. But obviously if you're working in the NHS as a band 5, you'd get between 1,800 up to 2,000 pounds for the month, even if you are sick. Okay? So that is why some people, they really try their best to tolerate all of this stress and, acuity because of such great benefit in the NHS. So what's the implication of these kind of benefit? The very good thing about this is if you suddenly become diagnosed with a chronic illness or something that can debilitate you for months, then you don't have to worry for those few months because you will still have full pay, but dependent on your years of service. So basically, if you've been in the NHS for over 10 years, then you will have, even if you are sick, you will still have full pay for the next 6 months. So that is such a huge help. That is a very good benefit as an employee. It will really help you to cope with your illness, to really, recover, knowing that you will still have your salary coming in to help you buy all the things that you need and to pay your bills and to buy your food, even if you are sick. As for me, the longest period of sickness that I've had was 2 weeks, and that was for my elective surgery, which is tonsillectomy, and then I had to recover for a total of 2 weeks for that. And the other one was when I actually had my left wrist traumatized, hit by a psychiatric patient, where it was all bruised. I did do a video about that as well, so you can check that out. And I had to go to A&E, had arm support. There was no major fracture, but I had these micro fractures that from time to time, when I lift heavy things or I twist to open a jar or something, it becomes painful. So I have to take care of my left hand. So yeah, that happened. I laugh about it now, but it was very, very serious. And yeah, probably one of the biggest reasons why I made my current decisions with regards to career progression. So when should you return to work? The simplest full answer is when you are fully recovered. Do not be pressured by the work conditions, thinking that your colleagues might resent you for being sick for too long, or that you are feeling guilty because you're leaving some of your best staff, with such a big load of patients. So don't think about that. And even if it's your manager sort of implicitly pressuring you, don't give in. In fact, some trusts even have a policy on presenteeism as part of the sickness policy. And I'm just going to read that certain section with regards to presenteeism. So it says, employees must not attend work unless fit to do so, and must not return to work from sickness until fully recovered. It further goes on to say that the rationale for this is that if the employee comes back too soon, then they are at risk of passing the illness to other colleagues as well as to the patients. And the employee may go off sick again within the next few days, which is not a good thing. Number one, for your own health, but number two is also for your employment record, okay, with regards to your sickness absence. Any sickness that happens within 48 hours of returning from a previous sickness, according to policy, it is your manager's discretion whether to consider this as two separate sickness episodes or join them as one. It would actually be better to have them as one if it was the same cause of illness, so that you will have a lower Bradford score and a lower trigger with regards to absence. Okay, and we will discuss that in topic number 5. Okay, so according to different policies, you should have a return to work meeting. That meeting should be warm. It is welcoming you back into the work environment, and it should be in a friendly, open, and understanding and private environment. A is your absence discussion, wherein the manager will talk to you about the reason for your illness. Was there any predisposing factor connected to work that maybe changed so that you will not be sick again? Or is there any change in your condition? Or has the GP, for example, told you that the cause, as like for example for me, one of the causes of my migraine was not being able to sleep very well on night shifts. So from that point on, um, there was a decreasing pattern of night shift until we had enough staff for me to fully stay on day shift. R is your responsibility to attend work. So this is the manager outlining you what your responsibilities are. For example, if you haven't um, given your certificates, but also a more serious discussion if you've been absent quite a lot of times, as to, you are employed here to work, and I can see that sort of you've always been sick, and more than half the time you are sick rather than at work. So is this work really something that you want, or perhaps you wanted to discover a different career or maybe a different department, so that you will actually have something that you love, and something that will not produce too much stress and increase your chances of being ill, something like that. M will be your move on. So how do you move on from this episode of illness? Are there any physical changes, any schedule or roster changes that needs to be done in order for you to cope with coming back to work? What are the expectations moving forward? And if you need any support, do you need any occupational health referral for ongoing support? So that's within this return to work meeting. Number 5, we will discuss about your absence markers or your trigger systems with regards to sickness in the NHS. So this is very important. And to be honest, I didn't realize how important this was up until I got called up by my manager, because I didn't really understand the full scale and what are the computations with regards to the scoring. And I have to be honest, I did reach for that specific year when I had several migraine episodes compounded with several injuries from patients and blah blah blah, that I actually reached a medium score that would really instigate a formal HR meeting. So here's what you need to know. So different trusts may use different systems. So one of the systems being used is what we call the Bradford scoring. The Bradford scoring counts sickness in a 12-month rolling period. So for example, I am checking your Bradford score now in October 2022. I'd be looking at all your sickness days and episodes up until November last year. Okay, so the last 12 months. If I was checking your Bradford score in January, I would be looking back 12 months up until February of last year. Okay, so it's a rolling 12 months. Now, how is it calculated? So the formula is this, which is S multiplied by S multiplied by D equals your Bradford score. So what is S? So S is your sickness occasions or your sickness episodes in the last 52 weeks or last 12 months. D is your number of days of absence, that is in total. So let me give you an example. So for example, you had one absence episode which lasted 10 days. Your Bradford score will be 1 multiplied by 1, which is 1, multiplied by 10 days, so you have a Bradford score of 10. If, for example, you had 2 episodes of illness which lasted 5 days each, so technically there are, both are 10 days, right? But it becomes a different score now, because you will be multiplying 2 by 2, that's 4, times 10, then your score becomes higher. So are you starting to see the pattern that actually shorter duration of illness but higher number of episodes can make you score higher in terms of Bradford? Let's give you another third example. So if you had 10 absences 10 episodes of being sick in the last 12 months, and these were just 1 day of sickness each, you would think, oh, it's just a 1 day sickness, but you had 10 episodes. So your S would be 10 multiplied by 10, that's 100, and your D, which is a total number of days, is 10 days. 100 times 10, that your score is now 1000, and that is very high. So you can see how it is better to actually fully recover, take sickness absence long enough for you to recover rather than take few small days with very small gaps. That increases your Bradford score. So when do you trigger in terms of this Bradford scoring? So when you do trigger, this will mean that you need to have a formal HR meeting, okay, with regards to this. So in some trusts, they are very, very strict. As soon as you score 150, that's it. That's your trigger for a formal meeting. In some trusts, they may divide it into three. So for example, between 1 to 500, you get your informal review with your manager, just talking it out in the office, any changes that you need, and maybe occupational health referral. Then if you reach about 500 up to 999, then that would be your actual formal meeting, okay? Query any changes in your working pattern. Would you be better off with a flexible working hours, or should you be doing days only or nights only, things like that. Now if you go beyond 999, so your score is 1000 or more, then that could actually be very bad for you. That could be a grounds for your dismissal. Okay, so make sure you do not make that mistake. Now, do not rely on the fact that NHS is so short that they wouldn't fire you. Okay, there are thousands of nurses, possibly more competent than you, that are just waiting for that opportunity to come up in order to work here in the UK. So do not even take that chance. Okay? And if you do have this problem, that will be passed on. That information will be passed on to your next employer because it is on your employee record, and that can be formally requested by your next employer. The other system used by other NHS trusts is your traffic light system. So they don't use the Bradford, but they have an amber and red trigger system. You will have an amber trigger if you have 3 episodes of illness or more than 6 days cumulative illness within the last 12 months. You will have a red trigger if you have 4 sickness episodes or 12 days or more. An important point to remember with regards to the trigger systems and the Bradford scoring is that certain conditions or situations of illness are not included, so they are exempted from the counting. And these include, number 1, absences relating to pregnancy. So if you are having hyperemesis gravidarum, obviously you can't work in that condition, then you go off sick, that is not counted in your triggers. Other absence, which is not sickness as well, will not be counted in your triggers. For example, maternity, paternity leave, and adoption leave. If you have compassionate leave or time off in lieu, or those are odd hours that are not paid as overtime, but rather you are taking them back by either leaving early or collecting them all and taking a full day off. Okay? So let's have a quick talk about getting sick in the middle of work. So this has happened maybe 3 times with me when my migraine just happened in the middle of work. Trusts differ with their policy regards to this one. So in certain trusts, if you get sick more than 6 hours after or within your shift, then you will be sent home, obviously, but then that shift will be recorded as you having worked that full day. Okay? So it is not counted as a sick day. It will be the next day that starts the counting as your sickness leave. In other trusts, regardless of what time or how many hours you've worked already in your shift, and you go home because you got ill, then it will be counted as day one of your illness. So make sure you know your local policy, okay? Or you can just ask your manager with regards to that. So those are the essential things that you need to know with regards to sickness absence in the NHS. I actually have a lot more of things to say, but I know this video is getting too long. So for my next video, we're gonna talk about why you should only take your sickness absence when you absolutely need to do so. What are the reasons for this, and what could happen if you do it wrong? So make sure you do subscribe to my channel, give this video a like, and share this video to your friends for more awareness on our rights and responsibilities with regards to sickness absence. And that will be the end of this video. So thank you very much for joining me on this very important topic. I hope that I have helped you today. Do leave any comments, any suggestions down in the comment section below, and I will definitely reply, and hopefully we can continue to communicate with each other. Thank you so much for being with me today. I really hope that you have a lovely week, and see you next time. Bye!